Welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. My name is Audrey Monkey, and I am your host. I have been a summer camp director for more than 30 years and have worked with thousands of campers, young adult counselors, and parents. I'm also raising 5 kids of my own who are currently ages 14 to 24. So about half of them are already young adults. Here on the podcast and on my website, I share stories, tips, and ideas to help parents and anyone else who works with young people raise competent, kind, self-reliant, optimistic kids. Summer camp, parenting, and happiness are my main gigs here at Sunshine Parenting. So if you're interested in any or all of those topics, you've come to the right place. Welcome. In episode 35, I'm talking with Jill Stribling. She is a mother of 2 who lives in Madrid, Spain. She runs an English enrichment program as well as 2 preschools called English for Fun. What we're talking about is her decision to unplug her 10-year-old son starting last summer. Hope you enjoy the podcast. Hi, Jill. It's so good to have you on the podcast today.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I love Sunshine Parenting. I'm a huge fan.
Okay, awesome. Jill, to start with, can you introduce yourself and just tell us about where you are, what you do, and just a little bit about your history? Because I think our listeners would really like to hear that.
Okay, perfect. Well, my name is Jill Stribling. I am the owner of a company called English for Fun, and my company is located in Madrid, Spain. I moved to Spain 17 years ago for work. I had gotten a job to work at the American School in Madrid, and I stayed for love. And as you can tell, I must like it here. I now have 2 children, and we live in Madrid happily.
And I had the wonderful opportunity to come visit you and see your schools. So why don't you talk a little bit about what English for Fun does, what your company is?
Okay, so we're an educational organization. It actually began in my living room in 2008 as an English enrichment program. Spain has a sort of disadvantage when it comes to languages, I think because Spanish is a dominant language. So it's one of those countries in Europe where we don't speak as many languages usually. I think Spain and England are sort of the winners as far as that goes. Winners, I don't know, but winners for English are fun. But I started the language academy in my living room with 1 student, and it kind of grew from there. And so we began, in 2011, we actually, as part of our English enrichment program, started another phase after being a mom and having kids and seeing what kind of educational opportunities there were for young children. I realized that I wanted my son and my daughter to have something a little bit different. And so we started an American preschool. My background is in education and early childhood education. And so our preschool began sort of as a mom trying to fill a need and trying to offer creative opportunities for children to learn here, where, the education system's a little bit more, Spain was a dictatorship until 1975. And so the education system is the one thing that really hasn't evolved since then. And I think that, for me, it was one of those opportunities to innovate education, starting with the youngest learners. And so our preschool began back then. And since then, we just keep growing. We keep launching new things. We have English for Work. We still have our enrichment program, which is very strong. We do an urban summer camp program. Pretty much anything you can do. And lately, I've kind of been stepping back. We opened a second school in a neighboring city this year. And so I'm kind of in the phase of allowing my team to take over the school. And, we're all learning through trial and error. Luckily, we have happy families inside of our school, and that keeps us going. And we keep trying to innovate with the latest research that comes out of the United States.
Yes, I definitely, that struck me when I was there. I got to come speak to your parents, and what a great involved group, and just all the resources that you're providing parents. And remember that, tell me about that thing. It's like water in that one room, like an experiential room. Talk about that for a second, because that was really cool to see. Okay, so that's something really interesting. And actually the theory comes out of Holland. And I found out about it in Costa Rica. It's really random, but it's called a Snozolian room, and it's a stimulation lab
lab, and it's supposed to be really successful with people who have Alzheimer's. So you will find it here in Europe in some senior citizens' homes, but also it works really well for children with Asperger's and anything sort of on the spectrum, children who have Down syndrome. But anyone can go inside of the stimulation lab, and the idea is that you basically put children or adults into the lab, and all of the machines are running. You've seen it. It's quite an experience. But there's a machine for smell. You have sound. You have the 5 senses being activated at once. So children inside of that room, they get inside, they completely relax, and then you stimulate all of their senses with different activities. There are fiber optic cables. Yeah, it's really a neat experience, and it's interesting because every sort of child has their threshold, and so they can stay in there for a certain period of time before it becomes too much. But you're really stimulating the brain directly, and so it's just neurons going crazy and firing off, right?
That's amazing. I think if you have a picture of it, we should include it with the podcast, because I think I remember seeing that and just thinking it looked really amazing in there. So that was very cool.
It's kind of the place you want to hang out. No,
yes.
It was funny when our school was delayed in opening for a year, and while we were waiting to get the permits to finally open the building, there were some really dark days while we were waiting, and I would just go and sit inside of the stimulation lab and work in there with little tears coming down. So I was like, why wouldn't they want these opportunities for every child?
Oh, that's a good vision.
That was a special place in my heart. It kept me going.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, so what the main topic that I wanted to talk to you about, because I think you have done something that is quite unusual in this era of parenting. And so just backtracking a bit, so you're a camp parent. Your children go to my camp. And after camp last summer, and I actually didn't find out about this until I think November when I saw you when I visited Madrid, but you decided...
Well, I had a little bit of a temptation, I'll tell you. So Nico's been going to your camp since he was 5. And so that was 5 years ago, I guess. And this will be his 5th summer. Mm-hmm. But what was interesting is I noticed after camp how he returned from camp. And I had always kind of had this feeling inside of me that the technology thing, we really needed to be careful. I mean, he was born right at the time when the iPad came out, and I wanted to raise this brilliant child, and I thought, baby Einstein and all these things were great, and so he kind of just hit in the middle of that. And, I'm going to be honest, I'm a working parent, and sometimes Nico was a very active boy, and sometimes for me, that was just a really easy way to take a breath. Not going to lie. So when we would bring I kind of had this feeling about it. And what struck me about the camp is that, you had the no technology piece. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I want to see this in action. And so when he went there and he would come back from summer camp, we would notice he was just a completely different kid. And different in a good way, as he was going through all of his growing pains and learning to be away from us, he also would come back with this piece of him that was just a little bit better, And so I think it was after that, it was right before we got off the airplane to come to Gold Arrow Camp. So we were arriving 2 days before from Madrid, and it was one of those 16-hour flights, and he and I had an argument on the plane. We were about to arrive in Sacramento, and it was one of those moments where it was pull down the shade, and he wouldn't pull down the shade. And we'd been traveling for too many hours. I was like, if you don't pull down the shade, I'm grounding you from the iPad from all technology for a week. And he didn't pull down the shade. And I was like, okay, you're grounded. And then I thought to myself, this is so selfish. I thought to myself, oh my goodness, what am I doing? Am I crazy? We're on vacation. We're going to be in the car a lot. Why am I taking away his technology now? We're traveling back to Spain at the end of the summer. Am I nuts? So that's kind of how it started. But then after a few days, and then it hit, he had camp, and then right afterwards, we just kept extending it. So we would find any excuse to extend it because we noticed that he started sleeping better. His personality shifted. He wasn't nervous all the time. I mean, he was just that kid that was always active, always moving, always really nervous. And when we kind of removed that piece from the equation, we were like, I don't know if it's a technology removal or if he's just more relaxed here, but we're sticking to it, And so we did. We kept technology He was grounded from technology for the entire summer. We even did a road trip to San Diego, which was like, at one point, it was like 13 hours in the car. We had the most amazing conversations. It actually turned out to be our best summer vacation ever. And so my husband and I kind of stopped and said, wait a minute, maybe we're on to something here. And let's see, for our son, this is just what worked, And so I don't know if it's the right thing. I don't know if it's the wrong thing. I think for me, the biggest fear about it, and even when I speak to other parents about what we've done, you see that look for a minute. And I think for me, it was just almost like, how is this going to affect my life before I thought about, what's really happening and what is good for him,
Oh my gosh. Well, I just was really impressed. And I think especially impressed in that I know your son. And when we got to Spain, I remember the first time we saw you, we were like walking around at this park and he pulls out his book that he's reading. And I just remember, and he's really into reading, which is amazing. And guess what? One of the things that I've been learning and all these things that I'm learning about technology use is that they're not sure what is the main problem, but a big part of it could just be the displacement effect. So if you're on your phone or technology, it's instead of something else. And for kids, especially younger ones, it's instead of playing, being outside, reading, all these really good positive things that are good for their development. So it may just be that with our technology time, it's just that they're missing out on some other things that are really important to their development. But I will also say, I was just struck by how calm your son is. And when you don't have that, I think I've noticed it especially with boys, but I think it's for everybody, is that when they know they're not going to have the phone or the device, they're not looking for when their next opportunity is for it.
Yeah. That's what really scared me. It's funny that you say that, because what really scared me about him is that we were those parents that, we read all the books and we were very limiting with what he was allowed. So he would only get technology on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, no more than 2 hours. We tried to keep it to that minimum, but it didn't matter. He would wait for that all week. That was his thing, and I was like, oh my goodness, my son's addicted to technology and we're here. We think we're doing the right thing, And then I don't know if you've read the book Leaders Eat Last, but I started, thanks to a lot of the recommendations that you've given, I started really getting into that, for professional reasons and kind of trying to figure out, with the newer generation, like what do we need to do in order to make them successful, especially they're coming to work and live with us abroad. That's a big responsibility. And how do we help them in order to grow as adults? Because the young adult now is really different than when I was a young adult. And so I started reading, so I think Simon Sinek, his millennial chat, like that was really amazing. But then from there, I read Leaders Eat Last, and there's a huge piece in there where he talks about, one of the biggest problems for this generation is that just automatic, the dopamine, because he talks about, what we have inside, all the natural things that we're producing in our body. And because dopamine's taking over with the instant gratification and the things that technology offer, that, it is kind of a dangerous thing, because living in the real world isn't an option. And so I think that sort of, made me confident about making this decision. And I had to give a chat today at my kids' school, and I showed them inside of the chat. I have this list of rules in my own head where it talks about the dangers of technology and all the things I think. So then I can justify it to myself, and I'm like, oh my goodness, am I making the right, move? Should I be doing this? I have this list of all the bad things technology can do. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm doing a good thing for my kid. Whew.
Yeah, but I think you did really nail it on the head, to be honest. I mean, that is, I think, with all of us feeling so busy and frazzled and everything else, I think part of it is just, it's such a nice convenience. And I think part of it's, I remember I was interviewing Devorah Heitner, who wrote the book Screenwise, which has it's a very positive view, because I've been a little bit of what I would call a tech negative parent, which is not a good thing, because technology is here to stay. And I actually really like technology. I mean, here you and I are talking on FaceTime from Spain to America. So we love technology, and it has some really great purposes. But her whole thing in her book is about being a tech positive parent. So taking technology and saying, hey, how can we use this in our lives to enhance our lives? And, what do we need to do to make sure that it doesn't become a negative? And I think, we've now seen all the research is coming out that especially for younger kids, there are some negative impacts of too much screen use. And it's becoming clear that kids aren't going to self-regulate on this. If adults can't do it, I don't know how we can expect children to self-regulate and, say, well, I think I've been playing this video game for 5 hours now. I think it's time to stop. They're not going to do it. It's just like
and what I feel really, and it's going to be something that probably as a mom I'll live with forever, but I feel really guilty because I feel like I was just giving them a pack of cigarettes and I was like, hey, smoke whatever you want, and that for when the book was comparing, what we're doing, that made it a lot easier for me to sort of stick to our stand on technology. I say our, I'm trying really hard, but it does. It limits a few things, like, when Nico goes on play dates, and how we handle the play dates, or who he goes on play dates with. I mean, I'm not going to be crazy about him not getting on technology, but it was funny. He went to a friend's house a few weeks back, and that was the first time he had ever really noticed how people live in other households. And when he saw, in that family, everyone was kind of on a device. Nico was sort of ready to come home after a few hours. It was for him this wake up call, like, oh, wow, I don't really know how I fit here. So I think it's something that's really interesting, but that addictive piece, that's something that scares me. We were with friends a few weeks back and we had a lunch together and they automatically had pulled out the technology. They have much smaller kids, but they had pulled it out to sit, with us at the table. And all of a sudden I'm looking at their child. He's 1.5, and he's playing this little game on 1.5, almost 2. But he's playing this game on the computer, one of those little, you get gold coins or something, And all of a sudden, as the game's getting started, an advertisement for gaming, for online gaming, popped up on a game that was meant for children who are under 5. And I was like, oh my goodness. This is what they're trying to do to the kids here in Europe in the future. I was freaking out.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing is I think part of it is we have changed our lifestyle to want to have our kids, for example, come to a meal that we want to sit at for an hour and a half. And really a 1.5-year-old, that's not a good setting for, a young child. I mean, that's just not developmentally, they're not going to sit still. And so I think then technology becomes sort of a useful tool. And so again, if parents occasionally need to do that, for circumstances, but the problem is when it becomes just, that's what you always do. Whether you're waiting in line or here or there or whatever. And then kids don't get that opportunity to just be a little bit bored and have to look around and use a little creativity. So I think you're doing a great thing. Tell me about just a little bit more, because you kind of went into it more, but what kind of personality changes have you noticed in your son? He's 10 now, or is he 11?
No, he's 10. He'll be 11 in August.
Okay, so he's 10 years old. And what are some of the positive changes you've noted in him since you've really limited his screen use in the past, 6 months or year?
Well, I would say, first of all, I've noticed, he really lived his life in a virtual world. And so he would speak a lot about technology. Even, when he was at school, it was he was that kid that was always talking about, that was sort of his thing. He was that kid that would grow up to invent Minecraft or something, or whatever the next thing would be. But, so that would be one thing, is just that his conversation opportunities and options really opened up. And so now he's in a phase where he's talking about really interesting things, and a lot of the social skills that you work on and how to make friends and a lot of things that they do at camp, I'm noticing that he's putting into place, and just he's funny now. I mean, he's always, you could tell he had it in him, but he has a really great sense of humor, which is nice. He talks about a lot of really interesting things because he's this kid. He's like my husband. He has this photographic memory and he doesn't forget when it goes away. He'll bring up things that he learned when he was 2 or 3 and we're like, whoa. So we have to be really careful. But he actually, he has really interesting things to talk about. And he shows a lot more concern for others. I would say, I've noticed his empathy grow as well. So, it's always been in there and he's always been a nice kid and he takes care of others. But now he really goes out of his way to make sure that other people are happy and that they're feeling well, and I think that that's one of the things to where that's something that we're working on the other side, is making sure that that he understands that he needs to be valued as well in friendships, and making sure that, he's spending time with people that want him to feel good about himself just as much as he likes to make everybody feel good as well. So, no, I think that I've seen nothing but positives. There's not really anything that I've seen where I'm like, oh, man, I even noticed, we kind of, when we were more technology based as a family, it felt like we were kind of annoyed all the time. I don't know how to describe it, but we were much more short with each other. And now that that piece is removed, it seems like we have a lot more patience as a family for each other, and we spend more quality time together, I would say. I don't know.
That's amazing. So you make it sound, so obviously, did you kind of change your own technology rules at the same time? Did it make you more aware of how,
absolutely.
So how do you do that? Like, what's your setup for you and your husband, to kind of support him in his?
Well, we work a lot. And so when we get home, the working timetable here in Spain is much later than it is in the United States. And so, we're basically, the kids get home at around 5, and it's time, we pick them up at school at 5. So by the time we get back into Madrid, it's 5:45, 6. They have to hurry up, do homework, and go. And what we really try to do is we kind of put our phones off to the side. And then if we need to pick it up later after bedtime, we'll pick it up as well. That's hard. We're both entrepreneurs, but we try our best to just give them solid time. I mean, we've always in our family, bedtime stories are a really big thing for us. And even as the kids get older, we're they're 8 and 10. And we make sure we read every night together, but we just kind of don't revisit the technology until, and luckily in Spain, everybody goes to bed really late. So we can stay up for a while doing things and checking emails after.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. I've found the same thing. I've had to really set up rules for myself. And it really changes and gives, again, it's that displacement thing. I've wanted to read more, and I have now, because of disconnecting from email, like it's around 6 or 6 or before dinner, and then plugging my phone in for the night. I then all of a sudden now I have my evening to just kind of relax. We have a long dinner together, and then just to read, and I go to bed pretty early. And it's been really a good process for me. One thing that I think parents would really benefit from learning is that at camp, a lot of the kids, even these 15-year-old kids, will say how good they feel being away from their phone. So really, when parents give kids that opportunity, whether it's on a camping trip together or some kind of family event, I don't know that one day is really enough to get yourself, kind of detoxed, but it's really quite remarkable. I'm really hoping that other kids learn from their time at camp that how good it feels to just be kind of focusing on the moment and the people around you. And I'm hoping it translates into taking some of those better tech habits home. I know for our counselors, many of our counselors have said that being away from technology for the summer has changed how they view it when they get back. They notice more their peers, being on their phones. And so some of the counselors have told me stories about how they're the one who says, hey, we're going out to this meal or whatever. Let's put all our phones over here, and whoever touches it first has to pay. Or just funny games and things, so that even people in their 20s can monitor that. Because I think, like in my generation, I'm 51. So my friends, we don't have our phones out when we're at dinner. Like we would never think to, because it's just culturally, we've grown up when we go to dinner with a friend, we wouldn't do that. But when you go down to people in their 20s, they're growing up in a time where they've seen people with their phones out all the time. So even just experiencing that, I think, is so valuable for kids. So I wonder if that helped Nico at all, coming off of his 2 weeks at camp, just kind of maintaining it. Do you think that detox time kind of helped him a bit?
Yeah, I think it helped. Absolutely. It also helped us be purchase of it, and so we really made an effort when we knew that it was probably going to be difficult for him to go through a trip. And so we without technology, and so we put away our phones and there was something about, suddenly we all kind of wanted to be together anyway, and so that just kind of brought us together even more. And that's another thing I would say, I'm completely, it's really bad. I need it professionally, but I haven't been on Facebook, I think, in months. And I'm trying now to work on Instagram. That's really hard because that's one of the things we use professionally quite a bit. And that's a really easy one. But when you read a lot of the research about, healthy, how we're living, how we feel about ourselves, and talking about Instagram and how that relates to what's going on. So I am doing that less as well. I have my employees now sort of manning our Instagram account and just trying to be more conscious of it, because if I'm going to have my son live this life, it kind of naturally, I need to be able to do it too.
Absolutely.
So,
I think that's so wonderful.
For me is something that I'm okay with doing less of.
Yeah, that's great. Well, this has been so amazing, Jill. I think it will really be inspirational for other parents to just hear how you... I do. I really think
you can do it, guys. I promise. If I can do it, anyone can.
No, seriously, it's been so amazing. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. We'll have to do it again because you have so many great topics to share.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me. This is really fun. I can't believe that it's made such a big deal.
I was so inspired talking to Jill to look at my own family's screen time a bit more and see how I can cut back even more on my own screen time, because I already see the benefits, and I definitely see the benefits at summer camp when the kids are off their screens for an extended period of time. It really changes their personality, just like Jill says. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoy the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, I would really appreciate it if you would pop over to iTunes and put in a rating and review. That would be awesome. So last weekend, I had a fun opportunity to go to camp with my boys and my husband and two of their friends. And we visited a camp on the coast of California called Camp Ocean Pines. And we had a terrific day, having hawks on our arms and going owling late at night and throwing tomahawks and going tide pooling. It was such a terrific weekend outdoors. And I was reminded as I watched these 4 teenage boys exploring tide pools and doing all these fun outdoor activities. There's a quote that I've often seen that says, it's like a picture of kids outdoors, and it says something like, "They won't remember their best day on television." And with these 4 boys, the quote I'm going to leave you with was a quote in my head, which was, "They won't remember their best day on Fortnite."